Britain's Conversation with Tom Swarbrick.
Very good evening to you. Just gone 10. You're listening to Late Nights with Tom Swarbrick, Sunday to Thursday at 10 on LBC. Tonight,
it's very much the view of the Irish government and people of Ireland, north and south, that there shouldn't be customs checkpoints or tariffs on trade between north and south.
No luck for the Irish. Varadkar not happy with the new Brexit proposals as the EU seeks clarifications on elements of the plan. We'll bring you right up to speed with the events from across the continent. Plus, smack.
No child anywhere in this country should face physical punishment.
Scotland bans parents smacking their children. Wales apparently to become the next country in the United Kingdom to follow suit. And Extinction Rebellion hosed down. Details in an hour. First tonight, Shamima Begum, the teenager runaway who left the safety and security and opportunity of London to join the death cult of Islamic State in Syria. She was 15 when she left. 4 years later, and Shamima Begum is now holed up in a refugee camp in Syria. She has had and lost 3 children. Her ISIS terrorist husband is locked up in a detention centre in Syria. And as you know, Shamima Begum wants to come home.
I think a lot of people should have sympathy towards me for everything I've been through. You know, when I didn't know what I was getting into when I left, and I just was hoping that maybe for the sake of me and my child, they let me come back.
The head of the Foreign Intelligence Services in the UK says people like you are potentially very dangerous. What would you say to him?
They don't have any evidence against me doing anything dangerous. When I went to Syria, I was just a housewife the entire 4 years. Stayed at home, took care of my husband, took care of my kids. I never did anything dangerous. I never made propaganda. I never encouraged people to come to Syria. So,
did you know what Islamic State were doing when you left for Syria? Because they had beheaded people, there were executions.
Yeah, I knew about those things, and I was okay with it at first because, you know, I started becoming religious just before I left. And, you know, from what I heard, that Islamically that is all allowed, so I was okay with it.
Shamima Begum speaking some while ago. Her most recent appeal to come home was only a few days back and was rebuffed by the Home Secretary Priti Patel. The former Home Secretary Sajid Javid took the step of removing Shamima Begum's British citizenship, saying that she had Bangladeshi citizenship. And the lawyers acting for her and her family are contesting that, arguing that she has been made stateless, an act that breaches UK law. Tonight I'm joined in the studio for this hour by the Begum family lawyer, Tasneem Akunjee, who is here to take your calls as well. So if you have any questions about this case in particular, or indeed the wider issues of what Britain should do with British ISIS fighters who are captured in Syria, now is the chance. 0345 6060 973 is the number. You can text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. 10:05. Mr. Akunjee, welcome to the programme. Welcome to LBC. Good to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
There is a heck of a lot to get into. So I'm grateful to you for giving us an hour. So let me start by asking about Shamima herself and how much contact you have with her in Syria as her family's lawyer.
So none. And the only contact we've ever had has been indirectly through intermediaries that it was difficult to trust the nature of the messages coming through. So despite all of those hurdles, we managed to get her authority to start an appeal process, albeit with no instructions at all. The instructions that were relied on were simply through the media reporting of her saying that she wanted to come home, and that was enough to launch an appeal.
Who are the intermediaries operating in the camps that you're relying on to pass messages back?
So there are individuals in the camps who have phones which are illicitly held. They sometimes offer those phones to others to make contact with family members. That will depend on whether someone can afford to pay for those services, and sometimes you will have text messages that come through that are, let's say, asking for money, which is something that the people of the camps wouldn't be asking for because money doesn't work in those camps. So it's difficult to work out whether a message is coming unpolluted from a particular individual or whether someone else has got a phone number and is masquerading as that individual.
Obviously very difficult for her legal team to talk to her directly and for her family to talk to her directly, if that's the case.
And particularly with sensitive issues and the ability to rely on evidence, that certainly doesn't meet the mark for that.
So in the conversations that you have had, directly or indirectly, do you get the sense that she believes that she will be able to come back to Britain?
I mean, she's a highly traumatised young lady. She had hoped that she would be able to come to the UK. In terms of the last we've heard, it's the same as everyone else, which is a Daily Mail reporter's interactions with her face-to-face a few days ago, and he reports of her being in a highly depressed state, unsurprisingly. It doesn't go much more into that, but anyone who's lost 3 kids, who's in the circumstances she's in, we don't imagine that her mental health will be something that we can assess without further exploration, really.
I think that's probably fair, actually. You talk about reports in the Mail. There was one the other day about reports of chatter amongst families of those people who had run away from this country to join ISIS, who were apparently talking about trying to smuggle them back into the UK. I suspect you can confirm now that there are no plans by the Begum family to kind of proactively go and get her.
No, the family of, very soon after her disappearance, instructed lawyers to make sure that whatever activities they were hoping to engage in to encourage their daughters to come back, make contact and indeed come back home, were all legal, above board, and with the full knowledge of the UK apparatus, the UK police and the security services and what have you. And they've always maintained that line. I think in terms of chatter, that was a report from the security services speaking about, let's say, families in general in other circumstances.
But there's no suggestion that the family is going to find ways of bringing her back?
Not at all, no. The most of it was me going out there trying to make contact with her to engage in the legal process.
So let's look at the case then that you're hoping to bring, or the case that you're bringing against the decision to revoke her citizenship. What's the basis of your challenge to that decision by the government?
So to be clear, the lawyers dealing with that are Gareth Pearce and Bernberg Pearce. They're Shamima Begum's lawyers directly. The case is with them, and the general cut and thrust of it is that it is our general contention that there wouldn't have been any evidence to show that Shamima Begum had engaged in any sort of activity where it was proportionate to remove her of her citizenship, leaving her in the circumstances that she's in. And beyond that, there may well be the argument levied that she's been made stateless. Now, that is exploring that is a very, very technical legal issue. It has little to do with reality in the past in terms of case law, but in this case, it's a fairly unique scenario.
Well, can I just come on to that, because I was under the understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, that citizenship can be revoked by this country if somebody is a dual national.
Yes.
So does Shamima Begum have Bangladeshi citizenship?
So the argument is no, because the Bangladeshi government, having reviewed their laws, contend that she has not been a citizen and isn't a citizen and will not be a citizen of Bangladesh.
But again, please put me right, but I having done some reading around this, in Section 3 of Bangladesh's Citizenship Act, it says that a person shall be deemed a citizen if their parents or grandparents were born in Bangladesh, and her mother is from Bangladesh, isn't she?
Yes, but that's a reading of one piece of their legislation in isolation. So the Bangladeshis contend that if you look at their terrorism laws and how they interact with their own immigration laws, then that would mean that she would have been stripped of her citizenship by the act of what she'd done in terms of joining an organisation. So their contention is that looking at their laws in totality, that when applied to Shamima Begum, she would not have been a citizen at the point where the Home Secretary of this country decided to strip her of citizenship.
But would she have had rights to that citizenship given her mother's citizenship of Bangladesh? She would have been able to claim that citizenship, no?
That I'm not an expert on Bangladeshi law, so I wouldn't be able to make that assessment. But in terms of their foreign minister, he made a very unequivocal statement about that.
They're livid, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, effectively, their position is that she was born, brought up, raised, radicalised in the UK. She made a decision to go to Syria, nothing to do with them. She used a British passport to get there and British pounds to buy the tickets. And so they have no nexus with her whatsoever. And the idea that another state can impute citizenship of one of their citizens as being one of another country's and then dumping that person on them is offensive. And in terms of Jack Lett's case, the Canadians have been similarly incandescent.
Yeah. Again, as I understand it, the other way in which citizenship can be revoked is if the person is defined as being not conducive to the public good. Do you think it is conducive to the public good for Shamima Begum to be back in this country?
Sorry, so there's two limbs to that test. The Home Secretary would have had to have found that A, she's not conducive to the public good, and B, beyond that she would not be left stateless. So there are two limbs.
I see.
In terms of being conducive to the public good, that is something that has to be looked at in terms of proportionality. So what is the effect on the public good versus what is the effect on her, and would the effect on her personally outweigh the potential risk to the public good? That is something that we have no knowledge about, and only the courts will know that, because the evidence that was used purportedly by the Home Secretary to come to that decision about public good was not open, not communicated with us.
The National Guidance on Deprivation and Nullity of British Citizenship says defining the conduciveness to the public good as depriving in the public interest on the grounds of involvement in terrorism, espionage, serious organised crime, war crimes, or unacceptable behaviour. From a layman's reading of this, I would say it's cut and shut that, one, Shamima Begum has been involved in terrorism, and two, has committed unacceptable behaviour, no?
So, first of all, how do you define terrorism?
Joining ISIS, might be.
That's joining a prescribed organisation, which comes under the criminal law in the UK, under the Terrorism Act 2000. And the penalty for that is a custodial sentence, having been found guilty in a UK court, really. So the problem that we have is you may have an individual who engages in, let's say, something as horrific as the Manchester attacks in the UK, and Shamima Begum, as a 15-year-old girl, going and joining ISIS in another country and being, let's say, a housewife for the sake of argument. Both of them, let's say, are assessed in terms of evidence, and both of them are found guilty of whatever it is that is accused of them. The fellow who's committed this huge and heinous act in terms of planning Manchester, he would get life imprisonment in a UK prison where his food, health, safety would be guaranteed. Shamima Begum, having joined an organisation and then wanting to come back with no evidence of actually harming anyone, the result of the law is, according to the Home Secretary, is that she would be left indefinitely in a refugee camp with no provision of food, clothing, what have you. So,
but it was her choice to go, no?
A 15-year-old girl's choice who'd been groomed. Yes, it was that.
So, but she had agency in deciding whether or not she took herself to the airport, put herself on a plane, took herself to Turkey, got across the border. She had personal agency in that decision. No,
certainly she had agency, and that's something that needs to be looked at in terms of how much agency, because the idea that a 15-year-old girl, under the noses of counter-terrorism police, in the middle of an international witch hunt, and crossing two international borders from the UK to Turkey and then Turkey to Syria, managed to do that all by herself is frankly laughable.
So who do you think did it?
Well, in terms of the Turks managed to arrest an individual who helped her cross the border between...
I don't disagree that there would have been people who would have assisted her on that journey, but she ultimately chose to make it, and at 15 one can argue about whether or not she was in the right place to make that choice. You used the term witch hunt there. Yeah. I wonder whether you think that she has done anything wrong.
Yeah, of course. In terms of, frankly, leaving her family, her friends, the pain she's caused to all the people around her, going to Syria to join ISIS at the time she did. And what I mean by that is that ISIS had quite spectacularly committed heinous acts that were all over the media.
As she said herself, she'd seen those beheadings.
Indeed, yeah. No,
and she was, quote, okay with them.
Well, that's her quotes in her circumstance. In terms of her going out there against that, it doesn't make any logical sense to anyone who's reasonable at all. But we're not talking about logic and reason, we're talking about children who've been manipulated.
Loads of calls coming in, and I want to get to them in a moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Tasneem Akunjee, who is the lawyer for the family of Shamima Begum, is with us until 11 o'clock tonight. There are so many questions to ask, not just about this specific case, but about the wider issue of British people who have gone out to Syria and Iraq to fight on behalf of ISIS and what happens to them. There are reportedly around 600 or so, including their families, and the US is putting a lot of pressure on the UK to take them back. 0345 6060 973 to your calls in just a moment. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. The time now, 10:17.
This is LBC. Global's Make Some Noise Day returns on Friday, the 11th of October. LBC's charity. This year, we want to help even more organisations, such as Brighter Opportunities for Special People. This project helps children and young people with complex disabilities. His mum, Tiffany.
Bradley got diagnosed with ASD. He doesn't speak. He's not toilet trained. Life for him is quite hard.
Right now, you can get involved and help change young lives by donating at lbc.co.uk.
Clean shirt?
Yep.
Tie straight?
Uh-huh.
Shoes polished?
Yes.
You work hard to make a good impression when out with customers. And with eReceptionist,
Landline number?
your phone works just as hard
Studio recorded greeting?
when they call in.
24/7 answering?
All sorted.
eReceptionist, the professional business phone system that's just 30 pence a day. To find out more and get your free 30-day trial, search eReceptionist. Free trial cancellation required to avoid charges. Conditions apply.
If you want a career in media, your future starts here. The Global Academy, a unique school recruiting students for Year 10 and Year 12 who want to work in broadcast and digital media.
There's nowhere that really can offer what the Global Academy offers.
We're all here to do the same thing. We're all interested in media, whatever it is you want to do.
The Global Academy, rated good by Ofsted. Get more info and apply now for September 2020. Search Global Academy.
Here at LNER, we love giving you more value. And we all love more, don't we? More sleep, more sun, more me time. So we've added our new Azuma trains with more seats and more great value fares. In fact, there are 3,773 more £29 single tickets every week on our Azuma trains between London and Leeds. Brilliant. Book direct at lner.co.uk, launching alongside existing LNER trains.
Jason, did you put the bins out?
No, I did it last week.
Yes, and I did it yesterday when you took the car to work.
I saved the space while you picked up Ellie from ballet.
And I put them out when you gave Mum a lift to hospital.
At Hey Car, all of our used cars are quality checked, supplied by selected dealers and come with a warranty. So finding a car you'll love is easy. You just need to find somewhere to park it.
Quick, number 10 has gone out. Grab the bins and I'll get the car keys.
Find your perfect used car at heycar.co.uk.
It's your You to Me Are Everything station. LBC's sister station. Smooth Radio.
In the big savings event at Oak Furnitureland, you'll get our 100% solid hardwood furniture at really great prices. So whatever look you love, find something special for your home and then pay less for it. Don't miss the big savings event at Oak Furnitureland. Online and in-store. Ends Sunday.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
20 past 10 is the time. Welcome to the show. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. We are discussing with Tasneem Akunjee, the lawyer for the family of Shamima Begum, the case of that 15-year-old girl, as she was then, who left London to join ISIS in Syria, but also the wider issue of so many, around 600 or so, British citizens who have gone out to fight for ISIS in Iraq and Syria and who have taken their families with them. And there is growing pressure now from our greatest ally, the United States, to say, well, hang on a minute, they can't be left here indefinitely. The US isn't going to deal with them. The Kurds don't want to have to deal with them. Syria's in no position to deal with them. So you've got to take them back. 0345 6060 973 is the number to put some of your questions through to Mr. Akunjee. We'll start tonight with Tony in Manchester. Hiya, Tony.
Evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Well, sir, fire away.
All right, okay. Evening, Tasneem. Tasneem, as you're a solicitor, I imagine you're quite adept at thinking on your feet and constructing a compelling argument for just about anything on the spot. So I want to come at this from a slightly different angle. As we're discussing something which is one of the fruits, if you like, of Muslims being allowed to live in Europe, I've got a challenge for you in the form of a question. Can you name any single thing Muslims can do which native Britons can and which Britons couldn't survive or thrive without? Is there any one thing you can think of?
I'll say the Second World War, frankly, but...
the Second World War? So what's unique about that to Muslims? What, are you saying that was an entirely Muslim war?
Sorry, Tony, let me jump in here. Tony, I'm not sure what's the point of your question is driving at what?
Right, okay, all right, Tom. What I'm trying to explain is this is... Right, so we've got people going off to join a genocidal death cult that have literally committed genocide and mass rape and sexual enslavement against people for the crime as they perceive it of being non-Muslim. Right, so that's a direct consequence, along with Rotherham and Manchester, which Tasneem talked about, of the influx of Muslims into this country. What was the benefit to the native British population of that?
Tony,
No, let me finish. What was the benefit of that for the native British people? Will we ask whether we wanted that? Is there were we starving to death, or we had Balti houses, or maybe Pakistani and Bangladeshi?
Do you want me to answer that? Because I will.
Go ahead. Yeah. So what unique benefit?
All right, Tony, we've got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what benefit was there for allowing Muslims into the country, quote unquote? Right, well, nobody allowed Muslims in. What happened was that there were 2 world wars in Europe whereby the populations were decimated and European countries needed to bring in workers from around the world, right? And at that time, nobody discriminated on the basis of religion. Yeah, I'm sure that's something you're not happy with there, Tony, but individuals came over and they helped rebuild this country and other countries around Europe. That's the answer to your question. That's why there are people who are here from all over the world.
I think as well, frankly, the idea of suggesting, which I think was implicit in Tony's question there, that you can't be British and Muslim and make a contribution to this country as a result of your faith is frankly pathetic and a poor way to start your argument, even if you don't believe Shamima Begum should be allowed back. Let's go to Tony in Doncaster in South Yorkshire. Hi, Tony.
Hello, Tom.
Sir.
Can I my question for Shamima's solicitor is, does he think he's out of step with the court of public opinion?
Well, I think, to be fair, opinion is split. I mean, we've had Jacob Rees-Mogg quite publicly say that he supported the idea that Shamima Begum will return to the UK. And then we've had Sajid Javid, who's obviously made a decision contrary to that. And that's within the Conservative Party ranks and within the ranks of ministers who are close to the centre. So where we have a split along that, we have a split along public opinion in wider society as well. So it raises passions, of course it does. This country has suffered horrific attacks at the hands of people who have been inspired by ISIS, if not directly by ISIS. And one of the real problems with a suicide attack, like in Manchester, is that it leaves an unpaid debt in the feeling of the population because justice hasn't been done. The person who killed all these people took his own life, and redress seems to be amiss there. And unfortunately, sometimes another individual comes along, nothing to do with the first scenario, but because they're sort of somehow linked to it, then a lot of vitriol is put on that person. I think that's just part of the human condition, really. But in terms of when we're talking about how states act, how a Home Secretary applies the law, well, that's a different thing.
So in the court of public opinion, do you feel that Shamima Begum is a victim?
No. I think that in the court of public opinion, it's right that people are angry about what she did. I think that's fair. In terms of how we as a country respond to that, in terms of the law, well, that has to take in a lot wider considerations and impact on not just her, but other people. For example, I don't think in the court of public opinion anyone would consider that her child was guilty of anything. Mm-hmm. And shouldn't, frankly, have died because of circumstances around it. And the thing is that the two are impossible to tease out from one another.
Tony, what's your opinion of all of this?
Well, I think Peter Sutcliffe was allowed due process. I think the Cray twins were allowed due process. Harold Shipman was allowed due process. She is obviously entitled to the same as those people, whether they went right through process or not. Now, to be fair, I think the solicitor you've got with him is to be admired because he knows that he is meeting negative public opinion head on. But the thing is that in order to guarantee due process, you can't pick and choose whether or not you find the crimes appetising or not.
Okay. Tony, appreciate it. Thank you. Text here from Anthony in Greenwich. Tom, can you ask if Tasneem had watched a loved one beheaded with a knife, suffering absolute terror, would they still stand up for and defend an ISIS thug, says Anthony.
Well, it may not be well known to people, but my own home and my wife was attacked by an ISIS thug who left a knife in my door. So, yeah, I would, because that's the oath and that I've taken to defend any and all, to the best of my ability, that ask for my services. It's what every lawyer has to do. And if they pick and choose what cases they want to take, then our democracy will cease to function.
David's in Bromley. Hi, David.
Hello.
Far away.
Right. I think it's ridiculous in the first place that we're even considering allowing this woman back into the country. Because as far as I understand, she's not British. She's not English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish. She's Bangladeshi. She's not actually one of us. If we say for a moment that she is British and she's gone out there to fight with ISIS or to join ISIS in some capacity, that makes her a traitor. And if she's not British, then she's not entitled to that citizenship in the first place. I also think it's
well, hang on a second. Well, go on, finish your question.
Just one more thing to say, that I was very annoyed, to say the least. You asked this lawyer if he thinks she'd done anything wrong, and all he could say was that she'd caused pain to her family by going out there to join ISIS. I mean, is it a case of no harm, no foul? That she'd gone and killed a bunch of people, then we wouldn't let her back in. But as she didn't quite get around to it, oh yeah, she can come back. I don't think that's on at all.
Doesn't he?
Well, that's entirely inaccurate. You weren't listening to what I was saying, is that she had joined a terrorist organisation that is covered as a criminal offence under the Terrorism Act 2000. So that is the wrong that she did.
But what about David's point, which I think is that the punishment for that is, we don't want to hear, as David would see it, because that would, going to prison and having 3 meals a day and a roof overhead and warmth and clothing and those things that prisons provide, is actually not really as much of a punishment as being told to stay out there.
If we can be clear about what David is espousing race-based sort of citizenship. He's saying because she's not indigenous to this place that she's not British. So David needs to take it up with our government.
I'm saying that together, the fact that she's not indigenous and she's obviously picked that foreign identity, she's picked to side with her Bangladeshi Muslim identity in going to join ISIS.
Why?
That's
Why
not
would
a great British
David,
thing to do.
I just think, I'm afraid that the idea of siding with a Muslim identity, well, what Muslim identity? Which Muslim identity? How do you side with it? And the idea that by joining a death cult like ISIS, you are siding with the only Muslim identity is wrong-headed, to be honest, and not a good argument, frankly, if you want to try and make the case about why Shamima Begum should not be allowed back in the country. Thank you for the call. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Steph texts, if these jihadis come back, then Boris has just lost the next general election. I think it would be a massive national outrage on his watch, Tom. We'll talk about that idea that was reported at the weekend, that reportedly Boris Johnson is considering sending in the SAS to go and retrieve around 30 children who have British citizenship who are out there as a result of their parents taking them there. I'll put that to Tasneem in a few moments as well. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. More of your calls in just a moment. 10:30 is the time. Let's get your news headlines now. Serena Farrow.
The French.
This is LBC.
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the endless white beaches of Bali. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
Little Red Riding Hood has been trying to sell her grandma's home for some time now, but the estate agent's shining, sharp teeth have left her with sweat on her brow.
Trust me, darling, I just want what's best for you, hence the added fees.
However, she spoke to the friendly team at Property Rescue, who cut out the middleman and guaranteed a sale in as little as 48 hours with no fees whatsoever. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold.
Time is money. Or so money says. Well, money. I know you like to dictate every hour of every day, add to my to-do list and throw the odd spanner in the works. But not anymore. This is my business, and I run it on my watch. I'm in control now, money. And times are changing. Save time with instant business invoicing, now on the Barclays app. Search Barclays Business and make money work for you.
Must have a Barclays business account. T's and C's apply.
Fillet of fish from a dish. Share box and evening frocks. Big Mac down a cul-de-sac and even under a drying rack. Veggie deluxe and power cuts. Medium fries and rainy skies. Or maybe cheeseburgers in the bath. How daft. Wraps through cat flaps, nugs on rugs, or perhaps a McChicken sandwich to the river. Because now, we deliver. Download Uber Eats and enjoy McDonald's at home. At participating McDonald's, see mcdonalds.co.uk/McDelivery to see if there's one near you. Serving times and delivery fee apply. See Uber Eats app.
And we're talking about bad relationships today. Paul is on the line.
I've decided enough is enough. Things were bad from the start, if I'm honest. Every day was breaking my heart, draining my pockets.
So you've ended things?
Yep, I finished it today. My friends and family have been telling me for ages to get rid of them.
Right.
They're right, and they support me.
How did you do it?
I just bin them. All of them.
All of them?
Well, it's not like cigarettes have feelings, do they?
Stoptober. It's not you, it's them. It's not too late to join the thousands of others quitting smoking this October. For a range of free support, search Stoptober.
At Lidl, we're big on everything autumn can throw at us. Big on cozying up to a rainy British roast or soaking up the sun with a fresh chicken salad with a free-range British whole chicken for £3.15 per kilo. And big on all the root veg you dig from 49p. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Let's come straight back to your calls and questions for Shamima Begum's family lawyer, Tasneem Akunjee. Tina's in Basingstoke tonight. Hiya, Tina.
Hiya.
Hello.
Hi. So my question to Mr. Akunjee is, does it frustrate him when he sees news like UK courts deciding that Tommy Robinson has radicalised Darren Osborne and that being confirmed in the UK court, yet no question is being asked about whether he should be stripped of his British citizenship. Yet, on a parallel, we have a girl who left at the age of 15, groomed, faced various traumatic incidents that she did, wasn't interviewed by the Home Secretary, wasn't interviewed by any officials, was interviewed by somebody from the newspapers, hasn't gone through a UK trial, and yet she's been stripped of citizenship.
In principle that is frustrating, but if I could be a bit more accurate about the link between Tommy Robinson and Darren Osborne, that's been contested. I think in terms of Darren Osborne, he had sent an email which got an automatic reply from Tommy Robinson, so I don't think there was any direct communications between the two. But the point is taken that there is a narrative that is pernicious and does inspire individuals on the right wing to commit acts of violence, and there is a narrative on the Islamist, if you want to use a phrase that I don't like, a side of things that leads to some people being drawn into violence also. I don't actually believe in curtailing freedom of speech. I think that people should be judged upon their actions that they do, rather than blaming people who have said something that may not be criminal, and for those people listening to that and then acting off their own cognition. So my frustration is not that Tommy Robinson is prosecuted for the words he uses if they're not criminal. It's more that other individuals on the other side of the things have been prosecuted for words rather than actual actions.
Okay. Tina, thank you. John's in High Wycombe. Hi, John.
Hi. I'd just like to try and understand the grounds on which Sajid Javid made a stateless when, in fact, the Bangladeshi authorities had denied that she had any right to Bangladeshi citizenship.
Well, it's our contention that one of the problems for Sajid Javid is he didn't even check. So he didn't contact the Bangladeshi authorities and ask them her status, and to my understanding, he still hasn't done so. And I've been quite clear in a very long letter that's been publicised that I believed, my personal views, that Sajid Javid used Shamima Begum's situation as a personal platform in order to launch and promote his political career.
But there is no doubt that she has a Bangladeshi mother.
Yes.
And under Bangladeshi law, if you have a parent from that country, you are entitled to that citizenship. Whether or not she had that formally is clearly part of your case. Sure. But there's no doubt the link between a parent having that citizenship and the child having access to it.
Sure, but when the Home Secretary makes a decision about somebody which is going to affect their life and at that time her child's life, then they need to take expert opinion about these issues and look at the issues in totality, not look at the very briefest, statute and say, oh, I've looked at that statute and I think that statute on its own.
He's been asked about, Sajid Javid has been asked about this on various occasions and said that he was taking advice, and on the basis of lots of different advice, his primary responsibility is to keep the citizens of this country safe.
Yeah, I don't really believe him.
Why?
Well, because for 4 years, Shamima Begum was out of the country and known to be in ISIS territory, and in none of those 4 years was she or any of the others stripped of citizenship. It's only when she popped up in a refugee camp and gave an interview that suddenly dawned upon Sajid Javid that he's going to strip her of citizenship. Now, there's another fellow, Jack Letts. For many years, he's been known to have been suggested he's a fighter, admitted.
That's at the point at which they say they've been captured, one, so we know where they are, and secondly, they say they want to come back.
Well, no, there's been other individuals who we don't know where they are, but their family homes have received letters where they have been stripped of citizenship. Nobody knows who they are, where they are, or what have you. One would imagine that that's the security services knowing things that cause them to request the Home Secretary to actually strip such an individual. There are grades of people, but in terms of Shamima Begum, why then?
Just before I come to Al in Crewe for his question, let me ask you about something I mentioned before the news, this reported plan of Boris Johnson's, who is considering sending the SAS in to bring back British children who were taken by their parents to ISIS. What do you make of that idea?
Well, it's a waste of the SAS, really. In terms of going over to a refugee camp in Syria and picking up kids, we've had strings of journalists going out there who aren't SAS trained and coming back completely unscathed. So I think that's over-egging the cake to say that.
Well, if a member of Her Majesty's government had to go out there with them, a Foreign Office official, they would need protection.
Okay, I've been there, and you don't require SAS or anything like that.
Well, okay, so whatever the method...
Sure.
Do you agree with the idea of going out and proactively retrieving these under-16s who have British citizenship who are taken there by their parents?
I don't think that's in any way arguable, in that the children are entirely innocent, they are British citizens, they're in danger, and they should be returned to family members who can look after them or the state to look after them. Leaving them out there not only exposes them to the likelihood of death, which is quite high, but also to further radicalisation at maybe the hands of their own parents.
But the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has claimed that the UK would be guilty of rendition if they brought back British ISIS fighters against their will. If the child isn't going to be separated from the parents, if the parents don't want to go back for whatever reason, no one can quite imagine the circumstances in which that would happen, but it may happen. You can't force someone from one state to another under duress when they don't want to, no?
Well, no, that's not quite accurate, in that there is a legal mechanism for that, which is to make a child a ward of court, rather than for a parent and a court to then order for that child to be brought back.
But wouldn't you have to have an extradition treaty with Syria, which we don't have?
Well, it's not even Syria. We're talking about a rebel group called the SDF, who are not a state. They are a rebel organisation who are actually occupying territory against the wishes of the country that they're a host to, which is Syria. They're fighting Assad. So we're not even talking about a country-to-country issue. We're talking about an issue about where a state, the UK, is dealing with a rebel group that in some other jurisdictions is labelled as terrorists.
In Turkey, yeah.
In Turkey and Syria, yeah.
Let me just ask you this, on 84850, could you ask your guest how old and who groomed this young girl? Because if you look into it, I think you'll find it was a father that groomed her, that is still living in this country, and in my opinion, he should be there with her. Disgusting.
Completely wrong. Full stop.
It was nothing to do with the family.
Nothing to do with
nothing to do with the parents.
Yeah, I think the individual who's written that's conflating her with Amira Abbas's father, who was pictured at a rally once.
But in terms of who it was that did the grooming, the police and security services must know who it was that contacted these girls to persuade them to come over. Do you?
No, we don't know. The problem is that the first girl, Shamima Begum, not Shamima Begum, I'm not related, she'd gone out in December 2014. Three of her friends, Shamima Begum, Amira Abbas and Khadija Sultana, then left in February 2015. Now, what we do know is that Shamima Begum, the first girl, was the one who helped radicalise the others, and that she was in communication with the other girls and assisted them with whatever was necessary for them to to move over to Syria. That's contacts and individuals.
Let me come to Al in Crewe, who's been waiting patiently. Hi, Al.
Yeah, good evening, Tom, and how are you?
I'm very well, sir. Fire away with your question.
Right, it's a quick question. It's simply is, if this girl or lady, young woman, whatever you want to class her as, was 15 and radicalised and cannot justify, or now she was too young to justify what has happened, how can a 16-year-old girl cross the Atlantic, address the UN and be taken seriously, and yet someone who is less than 12 months younger be then held unaccountable for her actions?
Yeah, nobody's suggesting that Shamima Begum is held unaccountable for actions. What our argument is that if she's committed a criminal act, which arguably on the face of it the argument can be made, then she should face a jury of her peers with an accusation made in a Crown Court in the UK and pay the price for that.
It's interesting, sorry to interrupt, but it's interesting to me that you do think it is only arguable that she has committed a criminal offence.
Yeah, there's reasons for that, because in terms of her leaving at the age of 15, in Parliament we had the head of counter-terrorism at the time, and we had, which was Mark Rowley, and we had the commissioner at the time, Sir Bernard Hogenhow, both stating that they would be treating Shamima Begum and the other two girls as victims and not as criminals, as long as there was no other evidence that came to light of further criminality. So in that case, they have what's known in law as a legitimate expectation in terms of return, non-prosecution for that. Further than that, we have the Palermo Protocols, which are a set of laws that the UK adheres to when it comes to how we deal with children in the context of trafficking and sexual exploitation. And again, those kick in to provide a defence or even a prohibition on prosecution, except for certain types of offences.
So do you think that she wanted to go out and join ISIL, or was persuaded through other forces, a peer group who were doing it, friends who were going out there, people who were seeing all this stuff, that she didn't want to, but was sort of forced to in a way?
See, I think the thing is, in our law and our thinking, we don't look at children in that way. That we look at them in terms of some agency, but you have girls who will go and have a relationship with, let's say, a drug dealer. That happens fairly commonly. Some girls will run off with their teacher, really, and just go off to France and have a relationship, and there are victims of paedophilia there as well. Mm-hmm. Now, we know that there is an element of grooming in that. Mm-hmm. We know that grooming process takes away agency in terms of children, which is why we recognise that in the law. So it becomes hypocritical of us to start taking that knowledge, applying it to some people and not others.
Why do you think it was that she only wanted to come back once ISIS had been basically defeated territorially?
She's in love. She loves her husband, really. He's still alive, and he's the only one out of the others who was alive, and I don't,
That paints a really oddly and slightly anachronistically romantic vision of all of this. Here she is in the desert, in Syria, watching beheadings, knowing that ISIS are doing this, knowing some of the crimes that they're committing, having been grown up in a small L liberal society of ours, and yet the love of this guy that she's literally just met.
No, that's a different thing. So when she went out there, she wasn't married to them. She hadn't met him. That's one set of thinking patterns. Then the question that you put was, why do you think she's coming back only now? Now, in terms of or wants to come back now, as in 2019. So, yeah, ISIS is over. She's lost 2 children. She was fairly clear that she didn't want to lose the one that was gestating still within her. And so she was motivated for that. But I'll say this. Back in 2016, when we were trying to establish contact for the families of all 3 girls, we knew that they would get married. We knew that once they were married, quote-unquote, out there, that it would be very difficult to persuade them to come back. We also knew that whoever they ended up in a relationship would be dead fairly quickly. That's just the nature of war out there. So our strategy was to tell the families that whenever they were in contact with them, just to say, look, we love you, you've made a mistake, come back. At some point, when their partners die, they'll miss home. And that worked for Khadija Sultana. Right? Her partner died fairly soon in. She wanted to come home, and we had a plan to have her retrieved. Unfortunately, she didn't take the plunge, and she was killed sometime later. But without without them losing their partners, it was unlikely that they'd want to return.
I'm aware of the time. I'm going to come back to that plan to retrieve, if that's all right, because that is particularly interesting. Al, thank you for the call. So many more to come. 0345 6060 973, the number. More in just a moment. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC, 1048.
This is Brick on LBC. Text 84850.
Let me come to Maxwell in Chiswick before I ask you about that plan to retrieve Katrina Sultana. Maxwell, you've been on the line. Hi.
Hi. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Really, we're here because this thing happened, and we still don't really have the answers. We have people throwing their opinions into the air and seeing if they fly. So, which really brings me to my question, which is: could authorities or people in positions of responsibility have done more to prevent this happening?
So, prevent them from leaving, or prevent them, or the removal of the citizenship?
Well, prevent them from being radicalized in the first place, whilst also prevent them from leaving. Because we understand that, the authorities have not shown enough how schoolgirls can essentially go off to Syria. And while we also understand that the girls were questioned by police and they were under counter-terrorism investigation, this was somehow still not enough. And to me, it just brings back tragic memories of 7/7 and other terrible terrorist attacks, wherein authorities and intelligence have learned about these people beforehand and have still sort of allowed things to happen. So, in essence,
what on earth were the authorities doing if they were under their watch, to mean that they got out there in the first place, right?
Well, these are questions that need to be answered, essentially. So in the full interest of the law and the public, whether or not Miss Begum answers these questions or the local authorities answer these questions are two different conversations. But at the same time, they both need to be held accountable for what it is that they have done.
So it's a good point, given what we know about the police effort too, the handing over of notes for the girls to take back to their parents, which never made it, unsurprisingly.
Sure. So all these girls, there's 9 girls in total, were all part of a friendship circle in one school called the Bethnal Green Academy in East London. Now, whatever took place in terms of radicalisation and the network, it was clearly within that school. Local authorities are under a duty that when serious harm happens to a child, or they die, and there's a question mark about how the authorities dealt with it, they're supposed to conduct a serious case review. That process has been actively blocked by the mayor in Tower Hamlets, John Biggs, since day one, really. That is the question that needs to be asked. Why is John Biggs blocking a review of what took place to these girls in this school and what the local authority did about it? This is the worst case of child radicalisation in the Western Hemisphere, and there are lessons that we need to learn from this.
These 9 girls?
These 9 girls. And
when you say the worst, in the number or the type? Or
the number and the effect. So the number of girls involved, and a number of them were made wards of court afterwards, back in about 3 months later, for fear that they may be radicalised and go off as well. And also the effect that 4 girls have gone, and we are only aware of 1 having survived.
Let me just bring what the mayor of Tower Hamlets has said in response to that, because it's only fair that they get a say. John Biggs gets a saying. He says, "These claims are cynical and unfair. Personally agree that Miss Begum should be brought back to the UK. The council's position is very clear. It has looked into the circumstances of this case in great detail, found that it does not meet the threshold for a serious case review. It's a complex matter involving a number of people. It is unfair for Mr. Akunjee," that's you, "to try and seize an opportunity for his client by blaming the council for unsubstantiated failings." One of the girls that went, Khadija Sultana, you were saying a few moments ago that there was a plan to retrieve her, but that it didn't work. Can you describe why it didn't work and the circumstances in which it didn't work?
So, from the very beginning, we were aware that once the girls lost their husbands, they were more likely to be amenable to coming back home. And this actually happened to Khadija Sultana. Her quote-unquote husband was killed, and she wanted to come back. It happened at the time that we were, as a firm, we were involved in helping retrieve another lady who was held in captivity by Nusra in Syria, and we were successful in retrieving her, getting her out of Syria, over the border in Turkey, into a hospital and back to the UK. So we knew that our plan worked. Khadija Sultana was then asked at that time to take a leap of faith, because we knew it would work, to come into a particular vehicle at a particular time, and she'd be across the border and home soon enough. Unfortunately, Khadija had heard that two girls who were Austrian, who had tried to escape as well that week or thereabouts, had been caught by ISIS and were, as a punishment, raped and beaten to death. So Khadija lost her bottle to take the plunge, and 3 months later she was killed in an airstrike in her home, really.
And you're where at this point? What, trying to coax her into the car?
Yeah, I'm on a mobile phone talking to her on the border between Turkey and Syria.
You sound quite personally affected by that.
We had saved somebody, and we had the ability to save someone else, and we missed it by half an hour.
Do you feel sorry for them, the girls out there?
Well, first and foremost, the sympathy must be with their children, who are completely blameless in any of this. The idea that families have got grandkids out there that they've never seen, know exist, and know that they may not have parents or may not even be alive, that is mortifying. These girls who went out there, they were young, it's true, and they need to... evidence needs to be brought about against them. We need to understand through a criminal process. Isn't there enough
evidence, though, that they went and joined? As she said in that clip, Shamima Begum, she said that she knew that they were beheading people.
Yeah.
She knew what this group were doing. Mm-hmm. And as a 15-year-old young woman...
bring her back, put her in front of a criminal court, bring the evidence of that. She will have a right to a defence. She will explain herself, unencumbered by being in a camp full of ISIS supporters who want to kill her now, so we can trust in the evidence that she gives. A jury of her peers, other British citizens, will assess her evidence and the evidence that the Crown brings, and if they find her guilty, she'll be sentenced by a judge according to British law.
Do you think there are some people out there, British citizens, dual nationals, whatever it might be, who, on the face of it, and Shamima has never suggested that she was involved in shooting or killing or fighting, and presumably, given the culture of ISIS, wouldn't have been allowed to, perhaps, given the way in which they go about it, although there are some female fighters. There are some people who are incredibly dangerous, who are out there, who should not come back into this country. True?
There are people out there who it would have been better for humanity if they fell out on the battlefield, right? There are some scary people out there. And the problem that we have now is that because we've hidden and left our responsibilities to the last minute and being these responsibilities forced on us by America, then we are going to have to deal with a mass of people, which is going to be very difficult to triage and work out who is really dangerous and who isn't. And that is a task that's gargantuan. And there are people out there who you wouldn't wish on your worst enemies.
Do you think those people should be brought back and tried in the same way?
I think they have to be, because they
have to be.
I'll tell you why. If left out there, the Kurds, who are only able to fund these camps through American money, if that runs out, these people will bleed out into the wilderness, and they will reappear. They are skilled, and they will reappear and wreak havoc. If you think they're scary, if we don't do something about rehabilitating the children, Baghdadi himself was radicalized in Abu Ghraib prison.
He's the leader of ISIS.
He is, but he was effectively radicalized in Abu Ghraib prison but as an adult. Now, these children have been born and raised with the ISIS cult, having had no fingerprints taken from them, no knowledge of their name, no DNA, and no face print. Right? Some of these kids are blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and some of them are black-faced and curly-haired. ISIS, for all of its evils, was not discriminatory in terms of race. Now, these people will appear anywhere in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, and claim to be anything, and there's no record of them.
And that is already starting to happen if you see some movement of ISIS into Libya, for example, where it is clearly a failed state. We've completely run out of time. This obviously could go on for the rest of the night, to be honest. Just very, very finally, what is the next stage of the Shamima's case that you're expecting to have, and when is it going to happen?
So her case is lodged with what's known as the SIAC courts, the Special Immigration Appeal Courts. That is, we hope, likely to be soon, where they hear the evidence, and the evidence will be partly in secret, which we wouldn't see, and partly in open. The courts will assess that and then decide whether the preliminary motion, which I imagine will be that she be brought back in order to be able to give evidence in her own trial, will be decided, and that will be the first step.
And that's going to happen?
I would imagine in the next few weeks.
Okay. Tasneem Akunjee, grateful to have you in. Thank you for spending us an hour of your time. Tasneem Akunjee, the lawyer for the family of Shamima Begum. This case isn't going anywhere, clearly, as you just heard. We'll keep across it on LBC. Thank you for all your calls. Stay tuned. We'll talk, of course, about Brexit and about Extinction Rebellion, the climate change protesters who have hosed down the Treasury in fake blood and accidentally caught themselves in it as well. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. That all comes after the news at 11 o'clock.